afternoon, students. Deepak, am I audible? आवाज आ रही है? All right. Thank you. Okay. So, new chapter in Indian history, that is the Gupta Age. Time period 300 to 550 CE. Where does the UPSC ask questions from? The rise and expansion of Gupta power, the administrative structure of the Guptas, including the structure of their central government, provincial administration, taxation system, city administration, the elements of feudalism, factors behind its emergence, etc. Economic life of the Gupta age, society of the Gupta age, and religion and cultural developments during the Gupta age, literary developments during the Gupta age. So this is what we are going to be covering. First of all, the rise and expansion of Gupta power. According to the Puranic literature of the Gupta period, initially the Guptas appear to be feudatories of the Kushans. कहाँ पर? At Prayag. The earliest known Gupta ruler was Shrigupt, followed by Ghatotkacha. However, neither of these rulers was a sovereign in the true sense. They were both underlings, vassals or feudatories of the Kushans. Chandragupta I, who was the successor of Ghatotkacha, who actually acceded to the throne in the year 319 CE, is considered to be the real founder of the Gupta Empire, since he overthrew the yoke of the Kushans, right? So before we move ahead, इतना information ले लीजिए, लिखो. The Guptas emerged in the region of Prayagraj as feudatories of the Kushans. As feudatories of the Kushans. As feudatories of the Kushans. Full stop. Their early rulers included Shrigupt and Ghatotkacha. Shrigupt and Ghatotkacha. However, neither of them enjoyed full-fledged sovereignty. Enjoyed full-fledged sovereignty. Full stop. Next point. By overthrowing the yoke, of Kushan rule, comma, Chandragupta the first emerged as the real founder of the Gupta Empire and established his capital at Pataliputra. Okay. Now, another thing that we need to keep in mind is that with the decline of any great power emerges a power vacuum, right? So this was the period when Kushan Empire was disintegrating, and in its wake, in different parts of North India, different competing powers were emerging. These included the Nagas of northern India, the Marundas of the Punjab region, and the Guptas in the region of Magad, right? And they began competing against each other for establishing supremacy over the whole of North India. Obviously, it was the Guptas who succeeded. Write down. With the decline of the Kushans, next point, with the decline of the Kushans, comma, a vacuum emerged with different powers trying to address them, or sorry, with different powers trying to fill it, including the Nagas in Western UP, comma, the Marundas in Punjab, and the Guptas in Magad. Full stop. Subpoint. It was the Guptas who ultimately emerged victorious and established their suzerainty over a major portion of North India. Full stop. Chandragupta, who was the first to subdue the Nagas, assumed the title Maharaja Dhiraj, meaning the king of kings. Assumed the title Maharaja Dhiraj, right? So this was the process of their rise. Now, next we need to take a look at Gupta expansion. Now, Within this, we have to focus upon two things. First of all, what were the factors or strategies which either facilitated the Gupta expansion or were used by the Guptas to expand their influence? And secondly, about the process of expansion. So, which territory became part of the Gupta Empire under which ruler? What was the strategy that was employed? Right. So, write down. The Guptas, you can give the subheading Gupta expansion. The Guptas may have been aided in their political expansion due to the military improvements made by the Kushans. Such as A, B, and C. A, brass armor and helmets. B, the saddle and stirrup. Right. So, to sit on the horse, the saddle, and to place the feet, the stirrup. Saddle and stirrup. And C, better chariots with an iron axle. Chariots were in use even before the Kushans, but the axle which connected the two wheels of the chariot was made of wood. Now, the wooden axle was replaced by iron axle. So, the chariots would be more robust and they would be more maneuverable as well. Right? Next point, likho. Apart from this, matrimonial alliances also played an important role in expanding Gupta influence. Example: Chandragupta the First married a princess of the Lichvi clan named Kumar Devi. How did this aid Chandragupta in expanding his control and influence? First of all, the Lichvis were Kshatriyas, whereas the Guptas were Vaishyas, according to the Puranic literature. Right? Vaishyas within the Varnashram Dharma system did not enjoy legitimacy as rulers. Therefore, by forming a matrimonial alliance with a prominent Kshatriya lineage, Chandragupta was hoping that Kshatriya tag would be associated with him and his successors as well. In fact, Chandragupta the First's son Samudragupta, as one of his titles, adopted the title Lichvi Dohitra. Literally, it means the son of the daughter of the Lichvis, the grandson of the Lichvis. So, Samudragupta was also seeking the legitimacy of his mother's Kshatriya lineage. Okay? Another way in which this matrimonial alliance may have assisted Chandragupta in consolidating power was that it would have provided the military alliance that the revived Lichvi clan would have given Chandragupta in consolidating the Magad region. They may have played an important role in assisting Chandragupta to suppress those elements which had been left behind by the Kushans. So, in suppressing those rebellions, resistance, pockets of resistance, etc. Right? That may be another utility. Samudragupta himself used matrimonial alliances as part of his imperial policy. Now, he followed a three-pronged imperial policy in order to expand his influence and maintain control. One of which हमें वो आगे जाकर के डिटेल में कवर करना है. One of which was called Kanyopanya. Right? Under this policy, the defeated rulers and feudatories of the Guptas had to offer the hand of one of their daughters in marriage to the Gupta emperor. This would ensure that the defeated rulers would not try to challenge Gupta authority once their military is withdrawn. Same would be the case with the feudatories, especially the more ambitious ones. So it was a kind of guarantee of good behavior. Chandragupta II also relied on matrimonial alliances. He was himself married to a Naga princess. Nagas were a major ruling group in western UP, and it is with their assistance that Chandragupta II actually defeated the Shakas, right? He also entered into an alliance with the Vakataka rulers of the Deccan region. So his daughter, Prabhavati Gupta, was married by him to the Vakataka ruler, Rudrasen II. This also secured Vakataka assistance when it came to challenging the hold of the Shakas over Western India. Following the death of Rudrasen, Prabhavati Gupta became the chief medium or chief link between the Guptas and administration within the Vakataka territory. Right? So, as we can see, matrimonial alliances played a major role in expanding and maintaining Gupta influence. Write this down. Chandragupta I married the Lichvi princess Kumar Devi. Thus consolidating his religious legitimacy to the matrimonial link with a famous Kshatriya clan. Subpoint. Additionally, his alliance with the Lichvis may also have assisted in may also have assisted in consolidating control over the Magad region. Over the Magad region. Full stop. Next subpoint. The importance of this alliance, is further underscored by the title Lichhavi Dohitra assumed by Samudragupta. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. Samudragupta himself used marriage as a political tool. Full stop. He introduced the practice of Kanyopanya. Under which all feudatories and defeated rulers had to offer the hand of one of their daughters in marriage to the king. In marriage to the emperor. Had to offer the hand of one of their daughters in marriage to the emperor. Full stop. Subpoint. Effectively, Samudragupta was converting potential rivals into potential allies. Full stop. Next point, main point. Chandragupta II carried on the tradition of matrimonial alliances by marrying a Naga princess. Full stop. Subpoint. Alliance with the Nagas. Consolidated control over Western UP and Malwa. Next main point. Further, he formed a matrimonial alliance. With the Vakatakas as well. Full stop. His daughter Prabhavati Gupta was married to the Vakataka ruler. His daughter Prabhavati Gupta was married to the Vakataka ruler Rudrasen the second. Full stop. Subpoint. This alliance was crucial in Vikramaditya's victory, in Vikramaditya's victory over the Shakas, full stop, over the Shakas. Next point. Upon the death of Rudrasen II, comma, Prabhavati Gupta, in her role as regent, acted as an agent of the Gupta Empire. In her role as regent, acted as an agent of the Gupta Empire. ठीक है, ये हो गया. Factors or strategies adopted by the Guptas to expand political control. First of all, military improvements, so they established military superiority, and secondly, matrimonial alliances. Process of expansion, different stages and undertaken by different rulers. Firstly, Chandragupta the First. Write down. During Chandragupta the First's reign, comma, the Guptas consolidated their control over Magad and parts of the Upper Ganga Valley. Right? When we say parts of the Upper Ganga Valley, we are talking about Prayagraj, we're talking about Varanasi, we're talking about Ayodhya, we're talking about the Awadh region effectively. Okay? Parts of the Upper Ganga Valley. During the reign of Chandragupta I, the Guptas consolidated their control over Magad and parts of the Upper Ganga Valley by overthrowing the Kushans, and subduing the local feudatories. Full stop. Next point. However, the most spectacular military expansion occurred during the reign of Samudragupta, who is regarded to be the greatest of all Gupta rulers. Full stop. His military exploits have been recorded in the famous Prayag Prashasti of Hari Sen. Now, I'm sure you guys remember that Ashok had erected a number of pillars with inscriptions all across northern India, right? One of those pillars was located at a site known as Kausam or Kaushambi, right? During the reign of Jahangir, it was transferred from Kaushambi to Allahabad, right? It contains the inscription of not only Ashok but two other famous Indian rulers. One, of course, is Samudragupta, and the other one is Jahangir. Right? Ashoka's inscription, Prakrit Brahmin. Samudragupta's inscription, Sanskrit Brahmin. And Jahangir's inscription, Persian in the Nastaliq script. Right? So, one pillar, three different inscriptions. The most famous of those inscriptions, however, is the Prayag Prashasti. Prayag because of the location of that pillar, and Prashasti is something which is written in praise of someone else, of the subject. Written by his or composed by his court poet, Hari Sen. Who is the subject? Samudragupta. And it is a panegyric inscription written in praise of somebody, eulogizing the great military achievements of Samudragupta. What have we seen? However, the greatest expansion of military expansion of the Gupta Empire took place during the reign of Samudragupta, who is widely regarded as the greatest of all Gupta emperors. His military achievements have been recorded in the Prayag Prashasti, in the famous Prayag Prashasti of Hari Singh. What does it tell us? Write down in the form of subpoints 1, 2, 3, 4 करके लिख सकते हो. और सब पॉइंट के पहले एक चीज लिखो. It informs us that Samudragupta undertook political expansion in several stages. Full stop. Subpoint number 1. During the first stage, he uprooted 9 kings of northern India, or 9 kings in the Ganga Valley. 9 kings in the Ganga Valley, including Ahichatra, Vidisha, and Champa. Ahichatra, Vidisha, and Champa. Full stop. Next point. During the second stage, he destroyed several Ganas in Punjab. Publics in Punjab, or oligarchies in Punjab. Next, number 3. In the third stage, he defeated 12 Atvikas, or forest tribes in central India. Next subpoint, number 4. During the fourth stage, he overcame 18 kingdoms in the Deccan and South India. 18 kingdoms in the Deccan and South India. And last one, number 5. During the fifth stage, comma, he defeated some foreign rulers, such as the Devaputras, Shahunshahis, and the Shahis. From their names, what does it appear? They must have been the descendants of the Kushans. Okay? Write down. These were probably the remnants of the Kushan Empire. The Kushan Empire. Okay? This is the information that we get from the Prayag Prashasti. But Samudragupta undertook expansion in 5 stages. Next likho. Next main point. From contemporary literature, comma, along with the Prayag Prashasti, it becomes clear that Samudragupta adopted a measured policy of imperialism. He was extremely aggressive, but he also understood the limitations of transport, communication, and technology. Therefore, he would not try to establish direct control over the entire area of conquest. Nearby areas, well populated and well defended areas, he would establish direct control. Then he also recognized the need to keep his feudatories satisfied but under control. So, some places where there would be indirect control, and in the far off regions, he would demand the payment of tribute, and on that condition, he would restore the defeated kings. So, from the literary sources and the Prayag Prashasti, it becomes clear that Samudragupta followed a measured policy of imperialism. Full stop. Imperial control differed over 3 levels. Full stop. These included the Graham, Anugraha, and Moksha regions. Graham were the home provinces where the ruler enjoyed or exercised direct control. Anugraha was the land controlled by the feudal lords who were subservient to the Guptas, and over here the king enjoyed indirect control through these feudal lords known as Samantas. And in the Moksha region, which were very far away regions, the defeated kings were restored. This was the territory of restored kings, where Gupta authority was not exercised either directly or indirectly. Okay? सब पॉइंट लिखो. The Graham region included the Ganga Valley and stretched up to the Vindhyas. Full stop. Next point. Areas under indirect control or Anugraha region. Areas under indirect control included Punjab, Sindh, Malwa, and Bengal. Next point. Moksha regions included the Deccan and the Deep South, along with the northwestern portion of the subcontinent. Okay? Next main point. Samudragupta utilized three innovative instruments to maintain control over feudatories and defeated rulers. These were Atmanivedan, Panyopanya, and Garud Mandaka. Right? Atmanivedan meant that simply meant seeking the king's grace. So the feudatories of the Guptas and the rulers defeated by Samudragupta would have to travel to Patliputra and publicly accept Samudragupta's overlordship. They would have to bow down before him. They would have to swear many oaths towards him. Right? They would also have to provide tribute to him, lavish him with expensive gifts, etc. So it was a public show of subservience. Okay. Kanyopanya, this we already know. Marrying the daughter to the king, right? And if these two conditions were accepted by the defeated rulers and the feudatories, the Guptas would issue them the authority to use their royal emblem, that is the Garud Mandaka. Right? Gupta emblem, seal, and flag. So, whether it is the territory of a feudal lord or the territory of a defeated ruler, all legal documents, all orders would be issued with the Gupta emblem and seal on it. Above the flag of the native feudal lord or the local ruler would fly the Gupta flag with the Garud symbol, right? So once again, in their territory also, they were publicly accepting the overlordship of the Guptas. This also provided them a degree of protection. Until unless they did not discard the Garud, the Guptas are not going to attack them again, because they would actually have the relationship of a client and patron, right? The Guptas being the patron and these lesser powers being the clients of the Guptas. So, what have you written? Three innovative instruments were used by Samudragupta in order to maintain control over defeated rulers and feudatories. These were Atmanivedan, Kanyupanya, and Garud Mandaka. And I hope you have written their definition. Seeking the king's grace, इसको आगे और बढ़ा करके लिख सकते हो. Meaning publicly submitting before the king, comma, accepting his overlordship, comma, offering tribute and gifts, Kanyopanya, meaning marrying the daughter to the king, that is feudal lords and defeated rulers had to offer their daughters as wives to the king. And Garud Mandaka, meaning authority to use the Gupta emblem, seal, and flag. In return to accepting the other conditions of Gupta vassalage. Okay. So in this way, Samudragupta established either direct or indirect control over a major portion of the subcontinent. In the immediate periphery of Magad, Gupta control would be direct, but in distant regions it would be indirect, and even in even more distant regions, they would be satisfied simply with the collection of tribute. Okay. Now, some question marks have been raised against the validity of Hari Sen's account in the Prayag Prashasti. So there are some historians who say that Samudragupta was never such a great conqueror, and Hari Sen has exaggerated the achievements of Samudragupta. So write down next main point. Some scholars have questioned the validity of Hari Sen's account some scholars have raised questions against the validity of Hari Sen's account on the grounds that number 1 and 2. Number 1, Hari Sen was a royal official. Hari Sen was a royal official. So would his account of his master's achievement be biased or unbiased? Obviously, it would be biased. It would not be entirely objective. Hari Sen was a royal official, and therefore partial towards Samudragupta. Number 2. Secondly, Hari Sen also seems to have exaggerated some information. Example, he says that Samudragupta also used to collect tribute from Sri Lanka. But this kind of information is not corroborated by any other source, either inscriptional or literary. Likho. Example, he states that Sri Lanka was a tributary state of the Gupta Empire. So on this basis, some historians have challenged the military achievements of Samudragupta. However, some other scholars have also offered strong counter arguments. Write down next main point. Such questions have been addressed by other scholars who have upheld the validity of the Prayag Prashasti. So stop. What is the basis of their arguments or their counter arguments? Write down 1, 2, 3 karke. Number 1, much of the information mentioned in the Prayag Prashasti is also corroborated by the Vakataka inscriptions and the contemporary and later literary sources. Right? Now, Vakataka inscriptions not composed by a patron or by a royal official of the Guptas. Contemporary and later literature also coming from non-Gupta sources. So they are reliable. And ये question नहीं उठा जा सकता that Hari Sen was showing favor to, or he was being biased towards Samudragupta. So these sources were not biased towards Samudragupta. Right? Next लिखो. Number 2. Samudragupta's coins. Samudragupta's coins have been discovered from the Malwa and the Upper Ganga Valley. Indicating that these regions were under his control. These regions were under his control. Next subpoint, number 3. Samudragupta also issued coins with the title Ashwamedh Parakrama, which indicate substantial military success. Which indicates substantial military success. Okay. So this was the expansion during the reign of Samudragupta. What have we seen from the Prayag Prashasti? In 5 stages, he expanded in all directions. However, he did not exercise direct control over the entire area of conquest. From the literary sources and Prayag Prashasti, it appears that he followed a measured policy of imperialism and divided his empire or area of conquest into 3 zones, where he exercised 3 different levels of power. In the Graham region, direct control; Anugrah region or feudal territories, indirect control; and Moksha region, no control. He was satisfied simply with the demand of tribute, annual tribute. For establishing control over the defeated kings and the feudatories, 3 new instruments were introduced: Atmanivedan, Kanyopanya, and Garud Mandaka. The validity of Prayag Prashasti has been challenged by some historians who have accused that Hari Sen was not objective, since he had a bias because of the royal patronage, and has at several places exaggerated the account of Samudragupta's victories. For example, he claimed that Sri Lanka was a tributary state. So if he was lying about this, what else was he lying about when talking about Samudragupta's great victories? However, other scholars have tried to uphold the validity of the Prayag Prashasti, and they continue to argue that Samudragupta was a great conqueror. They point out that much of the information in the Prayag Prashasti is actually corroborated by the Vakataka inscriptions, and as well as both contemporary as well as later literature, right? So these sources cannot be accused of being biased in favor of Samudragupta. They were more objective. Samudragupta's coins have also been found from Malwa and the Upper Ganga Valley, indicating that these regions were under his control. And his coins, gold coins bearing the title Ashwamedh Parakrama, that means the performer of the Ashwamedh sacrifice, indicates that he had registered a resounding military success. Otherwise, there was no point of publicly issuing such coins. Right? So, ये है समुद्रगुप्त. After him, next important ruler is Chandragupta II. Vikramaditya. Vikramaditya was his title. Right? Now, the strategy used by Samudragupta to expand his power has primarily been based on his military strength and prowess, whereas Chandragupta I had used diplomacy to consolidate his control. Chandragupta II is going to use both these. Write down. Chandragupta II combined the military prowess of his father and the diplomatic skill of his grandfather. Okay. So we need to highlight both the military achievements as well as the diplomatic skill displayed by Chandragupta II Vikramaditya. Next main point, likho. He strengthened his position with matrimonial alliances with both the Vakatakas and the Nagas. With both the Vakatakas and the Nagas. Full stop. Subpoint. This not only allowed him to crush the Shakas in Western India, but also to consolidate control. To crush the Shakas in Western India, but also to consolidate control over his own territory. Next main point. Control over Western India. Western India had been recently conquered by defeating the Shakas, right? Control over Western India was strengthened by establishing a second capital at Ujjain. Full stop. Next main point. Instead of driving away the local elites of Gujarat, right? Earlier they had been supporters of the Shakas. So normally practice was to replace the supporters of your enemies with your supporters to consolidate control. Instead of doing that, what he did was to incorporate them within the ruling structure, to draw the local elites in Gujarat from the Shaka camp into his own camp. Write down. So what have you written? Instead of driving away the local elites from Gujarat, he assimilated them into the Gupta power structure. Next point likho, main point. We get evidence of his victory over the Shakas also. Kaise? First of all, he issued special coins known as Rupakas. These were commemorative silver coins. In fact, these were the first instance when Guptas issued silver coins. Silver commemorative coins. Secondly, he also issued special type of coins known as the Lion Slayer coins. Lion was the royal emblem of the Shakas, and in the Gujarat region, only lions were found. Lion Slayer means he had defeated the Shakas. These were gold coins. Further, the iron pillar at Mehrauli talks about a powerful ruler named Chandra who defeated the Shakas and established his control over the region of Malwa. It also mentions that he controlled the entire territory from Bashlik to Banga. Banga is Bengal, Bashlik is the Indus region. Now, certain doubts have been raised about who this Chandra king was, but most people believe that it was nobody other than Chandragupta II Vikramaditya. Write down. Following his victory over the Shakas, Chandragupta issued special coins such as the silver Rupaka, and the Lion Slayer type gold coins. And the Lion Slayer type gold coins. And the Lion Slayer type gold coins to commemorate his victory. Next point. The inscription on the iron pillar at Mehrauli. The inscription on the iron pillar at Mehrauli talks about a king named Chandra who ruled from Ujjain and defeated the Shakas. Stop. It further claims that this ruler controlled the entire territory from Bashlik to Banga. From the Indus to Bengal. From Bashlik to Banga. ठीक है? Next point लिखो. His daughter Prabhavati Gupta, following the death of her husband, what was his name? Rudra Sen II, following the death of her husband, Rudra Sen II, acted as an agent of Chandragupta II. Acted as an agent of Chandragupta II. Thus greatly expanding Gupta influence. Thus greatly expanding Gupta influence in the Deccan region. In the Deccan region. Next main point. Therefore, it is safe to say that Vikramaditya possessed the military valor of his father and diplomatic skill of his grandfather. This was the process of rise and political expansion. Question. First of all, examine the role of matrimonial alliances in the expansion of Gupta control. Gupta control. Next question. Discuss the approach of Samudragupta towards empire building. Next question. Chandragupta Vikramaditya possessed his father's heart and his grandfather's mind. Discuss. His father's heart and his grandfather's mind. Take a minute, read each of these questions and let me know whether you'll be able to answer them or not. हो जाएगा? चलिए, good. Next theme that we have to cover is the administrative structure of the Guptas. Now, some things we see over here is that there is a distinction between theory and practice. Theoretically, according to the legal and religious texts of this period, Gupta administration was highly centralized. The king was an absolute despot, having no check upon his authority. He maintained a large bureaucracy, had a huge army, and a centralized system of taxation, which allowed him to exercise complete authority. Right? He maintained a large cabinet of appointed officials, and he had the authority to appoint, remove, or transfer them according to his wishes. Right? So it was highly centralized. Theoretically, there was a fixed rule of succession as well. According to the legal texts, the rule of primogeniture should be followed, right? And further, the state not only, or the king not only exercised absolute authority, the umbrella of his authority was also equally large. He was seen as the upholder of dharma. He was responsible for the welfare of his subjects. He was also responsible for the upkeep of religious monuments and institutions. He was also responsible for encouraging trade, production, agriculture, education, the arts, and cultural activities. Right? So these are the roles fixed by the normative texts for the Gupta state. But this was the theoretical picture alone. Reality was quite different. Practically speaking, there were major limitations to Gupta centralization. Namely, that the ruler was not always in a position to appoint his chief officials. Many such officials were hereditary, right? This indicates the feudalization of the bureaucracy. Further, many officials enjoyed more than one office, indicating that these entrenched officials had been able to expand their sphere of influence and may have even reduced or completely eliminated the influence of the ruler in those areas of government. Further, we also find that the Guptas followed a policy of vassalage and indirect rule, right? This means they would have to share power with their feudatories also. Feudalism was also emerging. Guptas, in fact, were the ones who introduced the practice of making land grants towards their top military officials. So they were, in fact, encouraging the growth of feudalism. And along with these land grants, certain sovereign powers were being outsourced by the state. For example, the power to collect taxes, the power to administer justice, the power to oversee general administration, the power to maintain law and order, the power to administer justice, etc. So these kinds of powers. Then the power to extract forced labor was also being transferred. Traditionally, these were the powers enjoyed only by the king, but now they are being outsourced. So the Gupta rulers were themselves overseeing the dilution of their own authority. This means limited centralization tha. Further, in the far away regions or in the feudal regions, जो अनुग्रह regions हैं, the Gupta literature and sorry, the Gupta inscriptions and the contemporary literature itself tells us that over there the local elites were elevated to the position of provincial governors. So even provincial governors were not always appointed by the Gupta rulers. They enjoyed hereditary privileges. Further, from the Gupta inscriptions, it appears that it was not the king, rather the provincial governors who used to appoint the district and sub-district level officials. Additionally, in local administration, the local feudatories also enjoyed feudal rights, also enjoyed hereditary rights. For example, there was a class of officials known as the Mahattaras, whose counter signature was necessary to confirm any land grant in that region. So, without his approval, no land grants made by the center or by the provincial governments could be approved, right? Or could go forward, right? So, this is one thing. Secondly, while theoretically a fixed rule of succession was in place, that is the rule of primogeniture, it was not always followed. The rule of primogeniture was frequently violated. Most famous case, the process of the emergence of Chandragupta II Vikramaditya as the Gupta ruler. He was not the eldest son of Samudragupta. Eldest son was Ramgupta. Ramgupta was overthrown and replaced by Chandragupta II only after ruling for 5 years. There is a very, very famous play known as Devi Chandraguptam, written by Vishakha Dutt. Right? Vishakha Dutt was a poet and dramatist at the court of Chandragupta II Vikramaditya. Over there, Chandragupta has been shown in an extremely positive light, and Ramgupta has been shown as a villain, an incapable ruler, an effeminate ruler who is not worthy of the throne, as well as his highly cultured and beautiful wife, that is Dhruv Devi. In fact, after the death of Samudragupta, according to that drama, a very powerful Shaka ruler attacked the Guptas and took away half the territory of the Gupta Empire. In fact, he then agreed to restore the lost territory to Ramgupta only on the condition that he hands over Dhruv Devi as a trophy to Rudrasimha, right? So ये पूरा कहानी चल रहा है, and once Ramgupta agrees to this condition, Chandragupta II is enraged. Till now, he was posted somewhere as a provincial governor, minding his own business, but now it was a matter of royal dignity. Therefore, he intervened. He first went and defeated Rudrasimha, then came back and overthrew Ramgupta. In this way, through this drama, what is Chandragupta actually trying to do? He is trying to legitimize the overthrow of his own brother. He is trying to gain legitimacy in the eyes of the people. Right? Now, do you think that in such wars of succession or in such conflicts, the two princes are fighting alone? No, they have their own armies, their own officials, their own supporters, their own courts, and even in the imperial court, different factions are for different people, right? So once one of these candidates becomes successful, will he not have to appease or satisfy those people who supported him? Yes, they would. So this would mean that the king would have to share power with the feudatories also, right? So this also led to the further influidation of the bureaucracy. Then upholding the dharma, looking after the welfare of the subject population, upkeeping of religious institutions, encouraging trade, production, agriculture, education, arts, cultural activities. Traditionally, these were the kinds of ambitious roles that the Mauryan state tried to perform. However, if we compare the roles actually performed by the Gupta state to the Mauryan state, we find that Gupta state was much less ambitious and its roles were much fewer. Okay? So that is what we can say about the administrative structure. Further detail, more final details we are going to see, but this is about the nature of the state. Theoretical picture is different from the real picture. All right, write down. Likho. The Gupta state was modeled after the Mauryan state. Gupta state was modeled after the Mauryan state. However, there are some important differences. There are some important differences. A, B, C, D करके. A. The Mauryan state represented a polity in which the king's authority seemed to be rising. Right? How can we say this? Both the Dharma Shastra as well as the Artha Shastra instruct the king to enjoy or to exercise absolute authority. Right? So if you want, example करके लिख लो. Example, both the Arthashastra and the Dharma Shastra instruct the king to exercise absolute power. Next sub point. B नहीं है, A के नीचे ही sub point. Another example. Ashok used spiritualism and paternalism to legitimize his control. And marginalize the priestly class. Right? This we have already seen, that how Ashoka introduced the concept of Dhamma with the element of spirituality as well as welfareism to show his people that he is like their father and his role need not be justified by any priestly class, right, or priestly officials, and that he is not only their paternal leader but also their spiritual leader. Thus, they do not look towards any priestly source for spiritual nourishment or instruction. So he was trying to centralize power actively through these means. This is also reflected in his royal title, that is Devanamti. नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट लिखो. In contrast, comma, the Gupta rulers actively enlisted the priestly class in legitimizing their rule. Okay? So they gave huge land grants to the priestly class. They gave important political positions to the members of the priestly class, to Brahmins. They tried to uphold the Varnashram Dharma system. That is why they were so concerned with their, or so invested in their matrimonial alliance with the Lichavis and other Kshatriya groups, because they themselves lacked that lineage, right? They came from the Vaishya background. They performed Vedic sacrifices such as the Ashwamedh sacrifice, etc. Right? They patronize Sanskrit learning, Sanskrit literature, temple building, etc. Right? So all this tells us that for the Guptas, support of the Brahmin class or priestly class was essential and important instrument of control, whereas Ashoka was trying to sideline them and control or centralize all power under his own hand. Right? So he was actually trying to establish royal supremacy and not the Guptas. This is the comparison that has been made. Then I mentioned a point that Ashok assumed the title Devnam Piya Piyadasi in order to sideline the priestly class. Now, the Guptas also assumed high sounding and divine titles such as Param Vishnu, Param Bhattarka, or other high sounding titles such as Maharaja Dhiraj, etc. Right? However, the meaning behind Ashoka's usage of Devnam Piya Piyadasi and their usage or Gupta usage of these titles is completely different. While Devnam Piya reflected Ashoka's attempt to establish his control over the spiritual realm by saying that he is the chosen ruler of God, they are actually doing something else. What are they trying to do? They have incorporated a number of feudatories under them who call themselves Rajas or Maharajas or Mahasamantas, Mahamandaleshwars, etc. Therefore, they need more and more high sounding exalted titles to distinguish themselves from their feudatories and underlings. So that is why the Guptas did it. Next sub point likho. Similarly, the pompous titles adopted by the Guptas, such as Maharaja Dhiraj, Parmeshwar, Param Bhattarka, and Param Vishnu, are indicative of growing insecurity. Full stop. They were compelled to use such titles to distinguish themselves from their tributaries who were also using royal titles, such as Raja and Maharaj. Okay? So Mauryan state exhibits rising royal authority, whereas Gupta state exhibits declining royal authority. That is one thing. B likho. B. The Gupta rulers the Gupta rulers, like the Mauryans, maintained a large court. Court means darbar. Maintained a large court with numerous officials, like the Mauryans. Full stop. However, once again, there are important differences. क्या? Number of officials maintained by the Mauryan kings seems to be much larger than the ones maintained by the Gupta rulers, right? Indicating that they had a smaller bureaucracy. Why do you think they would have a smaller bureaucracy? Firstly, because their empire was smaller, direct correlation between the size of the territory and the number of officials. Secondly, because unlike the Mauryan state, the Gupta empire did not have complete control over the economy. The Mauryans were controlling everything from mining to manufacturing, from the sale of salt to shipping. Guptas controlled none of these things, right? And that is why lesser number of functionaries were required. Thirdly, the number of taxes being collected by the Mauryans were much larger in number, and therefore tax assessors and collectors also needed to be employed. Tax administration was a big source of state employment during the Mauryan Empire. The number of taxes being collected by the Guptas were far fewer. Further, most of the tax collection responsibilities were in the hands of feudal or provincial officials, तो royal officials की जरूरत उतनी नहीं पड़ती थी. As a result, number of officials in the Mauryan state was much higher than the Gupta state. Clear? So, क्या लिखा है आपने? However, once again, there were major differences. Number one, the number of officials. Sorry, I think you have already written this. Like the Mauryans, the Guptas maintained a large court with maintained a big court with a large number of officials. However, their number seems to be much lower. Than the Mauryans. So, due to the following factors. Within this subpoints, you can write number one, the smaller size of their territory. The limited economic functions of their state. And number three, the narrower tax umbrella. ठीक है? Next लिखो. So we are still under B, and large number of officials, but number of officials seems to be, or the picture was quite different. इसमें एक चीज हमने देखी, the size of the bureaucracy was much smaller. And next लिखो, point or sub point, whatever you have been using till now, उसमें आगे continue करो. Similarly, unlike Unlike Mauryan officials, comma, Gupta officials often enjoyed more than one office, more than one position, or often occupied more than one position, right? So in the Mauryan state, every official will enjoy control only over a single subject of administration at every level. So there was complete separation of power. Checks and balances were being properly maintained. However, this is not the case for Gupta officials. In certain cases, a single Gupta official could hold 3 or 4 different positions. This means that he would be able to concentrate large sections of state authority under his personal command and could thus challenge the authority of the ruler himself, right? For example, Hari Sen, right? We've already mentioned him. He was not only the court poet of Samudragupta, he was also his foreign secretary, that is the Mahasandhi Vigrahaka. He was also the prime minister, that is the Mahamatya, and also the home secretary, or the person in charge of internal order or police, that is the Maha Dandanayaka, right? So somebody who is controlling executive authority, the police, as well as a foreign ministry, is he the real ruler or is the king the real ruler? I'll let you decide, right? And this also indicates that the reality was very different from the theory. The Gupta rulers enjoyed complete authority, but in reality, the case may have been different. Okay. Next, we also see one more thing with the Gupta bureaucracy, and that is, unlike Mauryan bureaucracy, Gupta bureaucracy seems to have several officials who were hereditary. Right? Likho. Unlike Mauryan officials, some Gupta officials were hereditary. Once again, we come to Hari Sen. He himself tells us that before he became Mahadandanayak of Samudragupta, it was his father who was the Mahadandanayak. So his father was the Mahadandanayak or Home Secretary before him. Okay. Then Ravi Sen, who was he? The son of Hari Sen. And like Hari Sen, who had served as the court poet of Samudragupta, Ravi Sen would later serve as the court poet of Chandragupta II Vikramaditya. ठीक है. Then another difference, another way in which the Mauryan bureaucracy differed from, Gupta bureaucracy differed from the Mauryan bureaucracy is that unlike Mauryan officials, top Gupta officials did not receive cash salaries. Rather, they were paid in the form of land grants. Okay? Write down. Unlike Mauryan officials, comma, Gupta officials were paid in the form of land grants. Next main point likho. All these elements indicate practical limitations to centralization in the Gupta Empire. Okay? So, on the one hand, in the Mauryan Empire, the influence of the king seems to have been increasing. Ashok was trying to centralize power through his paternalism and spiritualism. Guptas, in fact, were relying upon the priestly class to prop them up. They were reliant upon the support of the feudal class to support their claims to the throne and had to repay them through land grants, through feudal privileges, through hereditary rights, and even a share in the political power. Right? Further, this element of decentralization is also reflected in the nature of the Gupta bureaucracy. First of all, how does it appear that Gupta Empire was more decentralized? Its bureaucracy was not as large as the Mauryans, right? Secondly, Gupta officials enjoyed more than one office or occupied more than one office. Thirdly, there were a large number of hereditary officials within the Guptas. And fourthly, Gupta officials, unlike the Mauryan officials, were not paid in the form of cash, rather in the form of land grants. Okay? So, this is the picture of central administration. Next, provincial administration. Now, the Guptas divided their empire into large number of provinces known as Bhupis, which were further subdivided into Vishays, which were further subdivided into Vithis. At the lowest level were the villages or gram. The provincial governors were known by various titles such as Uparika, Maharaj, Kumaramatya, and Goptri, etc. Right? Now, the preference of the Gupta rulers was to nominate royal princes or their brothers as provincial governors. But if that was not the case, then Some trusted officials were to be nominated. However, this was not always possible since many of the feudatories had to be incorporated within the power structure and they demanded provincial office. So they had to be elevated to the position of provincial governor, thus the title Uparika Maharaj or Goptri. Right? Below the Goptri were officials at the level of the Vishay, Vithi and Gram. At the Vishay and Vithi level existed a large number of provincially appointed officials. Okay? They were not appointed by the kings, rather by the local provincial governors. Apart from the provincially appointed officials, also existed hereditary local officials. These were the sub-feudatories of the bigger feudal lords who were ruling as provincial governors. At the level of the Gram were officials such as the Gramika, who was the traditional village headman, but who was assisted by other officials such as Mahatra, etc. We have already mentioned this. His job was to confirm the land grants made. Right now, land grants made. So all this shows rising degree of decentralization and localization. Likho. The Gupta provincial administration was modeled after the Mauryan structure. Full stop. However, there were significant differences. Full stop. Next point. Provinces known as bhuktis were governed by officials called Uparika Maharaj, Kumar Amatya, Goptri, etc. इसमें एक और ऐड कर लो, Maharaj also. Next point. Central supervision over the governors was low, not limited, was low. Central supervision over the governors was low. सब पॉइंट में लिखो. Provincial officials or right sub-provincial officials were not appointed by the king. Next point. Nor did they report directly to the king. Full stop. Next point. Provincial ministers were likewise answerable to the local governor. And could not bypass him. In the case of the Mauryas, the Mahamatyas could bypass the provincial governors and report directly to the king. But this was not the case over here, right? So ऊपरिका के जितने भी ministers होंगे, they would have no direct contact with the king and would report only to the local governor. Okay? So they could not bypass his authority. The chain of command was fixed over here. Next main point. Districts known as Vishayas governed by a Vishaypati. विषय में Vishaypati also exhibited signs of feudal administration. Example, सब point करके example लिखो. There's a place called Damodaran in Bengal. From here we get a copper plate inscription belonging to the Gupta period. It talks about two successive generations of officials who ruled as Vishaypati or the district official of the same district. Write down the Damodaran, stop point करके Damodaran copper plate inscription informs us that this area was governed by two successive generations of Vishaypatis. This means that even at this level, the sub-provincial offices had become hereditary. Two successive generations of Vishaypatis. Next main point. Groups of villages known as Vithis had an official known as Mahatra, also known as Ayukta. An official known as Mahatra or Ayukta. Who was probably the dominant local elite, dominant local feudal lord. Right? And what is the special power that he enjoyed? The point likho. This official played an important role by approving all charters of land grants. Okay. And lastly, right, the gram or village was headed by a gramika who exercised complete autonomy. Stop. Sub point. From this period, we also witness the growing influence of caste institutions at this region or at this level. ठीक है, ये हो गया हमारा provincial administration. Once again, modeled after the Mauryan state, but does not display the same level of centralization and royal control. In fact, royal control seems to be quite weak. Provincial governors are not only of non-royal background, many of them are hereditary, so not royal appointees. They maintain complete control over their own council of ministers and are also responsible for overseeing all provincial administration, right? At the local levels of administration, we also start to see signs of feudalism, with feudal lords enjoying a great degree of discretion, authority, and power, right? So once again, there are differences. So central administration we have seen, provincial administration we have seen. Now we have to see city administration and the nature of the state. This we are going to cover in our next lecture, tomorrow's lecture. Okay? So I'm going to end this lecture now. If there are any doubts, please let me know. Chaliye then. Thank you. All right. So see you in tomorrow.